Technology, diversity, wine, the redwoods, and everything in between. Welcome to the Northern California Bay Area, and one show takes you inside the real estate that makes it all happen. This is By the Bay.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to By the Bay. I'm your host, Dan Ancheta, and I'm grateful that you're here. Today, my guest is Regina Jenkins, who is a fantastic real estate expert in the Bay Area. Her areas of expertise are in the Russian River and San Francisco, and she's a Petaluma resident, and she works for Vanguard Properties. Regina, thanks for being here. I'm really grateful that you're here. So, as you know, the show is about San Francisco real estate and Bay Area real estate, I should say. And I want to know, like, right now we're here in early October, just straight out of the gate. What is happening in this market right now? What are you seeing in your markets? And give me the overview.
Sure. So there are two very different spaces, the San Francisco market and the Sonoma County market. I specifically do a lot of business in the Russian River, which is even more unique than if you're looking at other parts of Sonoma County. So in San Francisco, I'm going to say this over and over again to every client I have and everywhere I go, there's so much opportunity. There are so many people who had no ability to get into the market for the last 10 years. This is your moment. Homes are selling for hot homes that normally would have sold multiple offers way over. There's so much opportunity to get in either at asking potentially, depending on where they're priced, or at a really good price. So I'm reaching out to everybody right now that I know who's kind of been holding back. They're afraid to enter the market and saying this is your time.
Nice. It's great because there's been so many people that we've worked with in the past that have been on the sidelines. They're pre-approved, they're ready to go. They really want to own a home, but they're up against 17, 25 offers on some of these really nice houses, or maybe that's a lot, but it's still multiple offers, super competitive, no contingencies, nothing, just we're going to buy this house kind of no matter what. Is that still happening, or are you seeing that dynamic change?
On really perfect properties that are staged well, they have nothing wrong with them,
Priced
they're in an
well,
ideal location, priced well, sure. Some of those are still going to go crazy. But if you're okay with a little bit of an outdated kitchen, or often properties that are not marketed very well, so like they don't have professional photography, they're not staged, that's where the opportunity is. And that's sort of where you want to make sure you're working with a local agent who really knows the market, who can go in and say, this is actually a good house, even though it looks horrible, on Zillow or Redfin or whatever.
That's so interesting about, professional photography. I think there was a time where you didn't really need that. Like, you just put it on the market and it's going to sell. Talk a little bit about the evolution of that process and marketing a home as a listing agent, maybe what are the needs of that part of the market right now?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting. I had a Russian River home that was darling, and the owners didn't want to do much to it. There was a bunch of siblings who owned it together, and they just didn't have the resources. And so, Vanguard has this cool program where we'll come in, we'll help you finance that up front to get those things done, to get it ready for market.
Cool.
And one of the things that's selling houses right now is social media, right? So the buyers that came in to buy that listing were not looking for a house. They saw a reel I had posted on social media that just came through their Instagram, and that's when they decided they wanted to buy a house, and they ended up being the buyers. So anybody can tell you, social media is really important, but that's a beautiful example of why you have to have beautiful photography. You have to have staging if you want to go bring in buyers who aren't even looking. And this was right when interest rates had gone up.
Okay.
So buyers were really hesitant to kind of step into the market. That's changed a lot.
Right.
But again, it's so important.
I want to talk about interest rates and maybe that coming up, but that the idea of proper staging, clean the house, knock off the cobwebs, make it ready to be sold. You have to put some effort in now to attract a buyer that's going to meet your terms and kind of come in close to where you're listing. So the two different markets that you're playing in, two very different types of inventory, right? You're having more second home, primarily kind of vacation, more river house type situation,
right.
not necessarily meant to be the full-time dwelling,
right.
As opposed to, San Francisco where these people are living full-time. Can you talk about the difference in those, like the bifurcation of that market, and like how does those, are they both seeing the same trends, or is there more elasticity in one of those markets and more demand in the other? How are you seeing that difference?
So I think it's really interesting because you're really working with a lot of the same people, right? A lot of the buyers at the Russian River and in Sonoma County are coming from Oakland, Berkeley, San Francisco, South Bay.
Right.
They were coming up here for vacation homes, right? Because the commute is
Just
crazy to get to the city. Post-COVID, people have so much more freedom. And so I think, aside from sort of the people who just left the state, right? A lot of friends in the city who just took off. They moved to either Truckee, Florida, North Carolina, right? So they just left the state. So I think there's, I don't know that people are as committed. I'm saying this and I'm like, I can hear all the people yelling at me right now.
Yeah.
I don't think that people are as committed to San Francisco as they were pre-COVID. And so there has been such a reevaluation of people's lives, myself included, right?
Sure.
I actually said in my wedding vows I would never leave San Francisco. We promised to each other we would be city people for the rest of our lives. And we just left a year ago and moved to Petaluma just because the quality of life that we saw during COVID and without having that same kind of commute, fast rush. I'm off topic here, but I think it's related because people are leaving San Francisco.
Right.
People who love San Francisco, this is your moment to buy because people are going to come back. But the city shut down in a really different way than Sonoma County did, right?
Right. Well, it seems like maybe the economics work something like people who wanted to be in San Francisco but couldn't afford to would move somewhere outside of San Francisco. They're in the East Bay, they're in the South Bay, they're somewhere else, and they're commuting in. And now there's an opportunity if they if they're still wanting and desiring to, that because of the migration out, there's people coming in, and those are the people who are displaced because of where the housing prices were and just the competition where they couldn't afford to buy. And now that might be their moment to move back to the city where they really want to be, and they want that more metro lifestyle. They want to be there in the busy part of the city and not in a more rural community like Petaluma or the Russian River or these other places that you still have access. You can still get there, but it's being actually physically there is maybe desirable for some of those folks. And
I think that there's opportunity for entry level home buying there in a way that there wasn't. So I have a listing right now. It just went contingent, but it was a 2-bedroom condo in the heart of the Mission, beautifully staged, had solar, backyard access, in the mid 700s.
That's like, I think people think when they think San Francisco, they're thinking $1 million, $1.5 million minimum, right?
Totally.
So I think that's one message that we want to be clear on, is that like, hey, maybe that was true, right? But now, like, that's a really great story that there's opportunity there that you can have a livable space. It's not like a 200 square foot nothing studio somewhere. Like it's a 2-bed, like that's a
parking,
good size space,
backyard, a block from all the cool stuff in the city. I have a cousin in Seattle. We were just talking about real estate she wants to get in, and I was like, she's talking about buying a condo for 1.2 in Seattle. Her heart is in San Francisco. Her family's in San Francisco. She moved to Seattle for affordability. And I was like, this is your moment to come get the entry-level property here. And it's the same in the Sunset and the Richmond, which is where my heart is, at Ocean Beach. It's like, go get your $1.12 million home. A year ago, nothing was selling under 1.6.
Right.
That wasn't falling down.
Well, and if you can buy now at the interest rates were there, so we'll move on to the interest rate conversation. Rates are relatively high right now. Not historically high, but relatively to where we were for the last number of years. If you can afford it now at 7%, and you can get adjusted to that payment, and that fits your lifestyle, and that works with your overall budget and financial plan, it's going to be really nice when those rates go back down in the future, and you can take advantage of a rate reduction, refinance, and lower your overall payment. And that's just kind of found money at that point. So if that fits, like if you could do it, like now's the time, right? Because you're going to fix your property taxes at a lower base, and not buying at 1.6. And so there's a lot of really good advantages to buying right now. The one disadvantage is where rates are, right?
The first house that we bought, I had an 8-month-old baby. We bought a duplex with family in the city. Wasn't ideal. Didn't have a backyard. I think we were at 8.25, and we had an FHA loan.
Right. Probably paid a point to get there too.
Yeah. Well, and so like it was anybody we would have talked to, old people, right? Who you need 20% down, all of that,
Sure.
which is great advice. I'm just saying we started actually paying our own mortgage. 5 years later, we sold it and we doubled. It sold for double, and that's not every case, but it was an amazing investment on our part. And people here are like, yeah, we've been getting 3.25 for 5 years or whatever, but I still bought a duplex in the city at 25 years old.
Right.
And that opportunity is here right now.
For sure. Yeah. And just so for listeners, so FHA is the Federal Housing Administration. So there's different loan programs that have different down payment requirements. And FHA is a very common first time home buyer. That's the stereotypical 3.5% down loan. And it's a great product. We bought our first home with an FHA loan. You bought your duplex with an FHA loan, which people don't always know that you could do up to 4 units FHA. And it's a really, really great product, especially for a first-time home buyer. When we bought our house, I didn't have great credit. I had good credit, but not perfect credit, and they're very forgiving with less than perfect credit. It's designed to help people get into their first home. Right?
Yeah, and 6 months ago, if I had clients who had FHA or VA loans, we would have to be very strategic, right? VA is another one where it's not a lot down.
It's for veterans.
It's a little more complicated to get through the loan process. Right. There's some more hurdles. Yep. I would have told people like, let's go find you an off-market house. Let's find you a house that's not marketed well. This house is you're probably not going to get this house. Well, right, but you need to set low expectations. Now I'm like, come on, this is your moment. Let's go find those houses.
So I think that's another great takeaway. So so I don't necessarily see how many offers come in on the loans that we wind up doing for our clients, but what I do see is the product types that we're seeing and what we're approving people for, and we're seeing a lot more VA and FHA.
Yeah, and
they're getting into contract and they're buying houses, which is really spectacular. It's awesome. So I think the message is that if you are what people would consider a less than ideal borrower, you don't have 100%, you don't have cash, right? Mm-hmm. You're getting a loan, maybe putting down 3.5%, 5% down. Like this is the market to be buying in, right? Because I think there's a lot less competition out there. Prices have not accelerated as much in my experience, and it seems like now's the time to strike.
Yep, I agree.
Great. So we're on the same page about that. So you mentioned earlier about Vanguard. So I want to go back to that. So Vanguard is a local brokerage based out of San Francisco.
Yep.
And there's offices kind of throughout the Bay Area.
Yep.
And they have that program to help renovate houses for market.
Yep.
What else tell me more about Vanguard.
So I chose to be with Vanguard for a number of reasons. As a consumer, I bought and sold a lot of houses before I got into the business myself, and the highest quality marketing always came from Vanguard. And I think a lot of sellers don't realize that the marketing is, well, one, the most important thing. Mm-hmm. But I remember interviewing agents and not realizing that, one, you pay everybody essentially the same, and then they pull out whatever marketing they want to pull out. So some people, you'll hire them to sell your house. You'll pay them the same commission you would pay someone else, and they'll take iPhone pictures and put them up on the web, right?
Yeah.
I have an entire marketing team behind me. So for every listing I do, you get professional pictures, a video, a website. So
it's just like a turnkey kit. It's you've got to, that you have all the resources and you go, this house needs these things and ready to go, right?
For the most part, I think I choose to take it up a little bit of a notch because I think it's really important. Each agent has a lot of autonomy in how they do things, but I have full support of Vanguard, and there's really high standards there.
That's great. I mean, having a high brand standard and making sure that all of the agents are marketed similarly, so that that if you're looking at a Vanguard property, it's been looked at, fully and done, and the marketing's done well and correctly.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite pastimes is looking at like the bad real estate pictures on the internet. Some of them just crack me up. It's like, why did you put that on? Okay, but hey, there's a buyer for it, I'm sure.
No, and that's where the opportunity comes in. And so I'm a little obsessed. I geek out a little bit on like waking up at 5 a.m. every morning and just going through what's new on the market and all these different markets. And, you know, I have a couple of clients that are looking for a deal, right? They don't want a house that's marketed well. They don't want to compete. They're investors. They're looking for, where can I go in and sneak in? And it's like, okay, like they didn't leaf blow before they took the pictures. This is your moment.
Right.
This is your
Here
thing.
we go.
Yeah. So it's really important.
I think it's really important to have that local agent that really can like critically look at it and go, okay, this doesn't show great. You said this earlier. It doesn't show great on the internet, but I know this neighborhood. I actually know this house. I've driven past it. I sold the house next door, whatever that situation is. This is worth it. Let's go take a look at it. Let's dive into it, and let's see past the lack of preparation on the house and see that there's quality behind it.
Yep.
Right. So, tell me a little bit more about the Russian River market, because that's a very kind of special area. Are you still seeing those second home buyers that are coming up from the city? Has that slowed down?
There are absolutely second home buyers out there. I think there's a lot of people who didn't want to compete in the last year, or they, put in a couple of offers and the value wasn't quite there for them to really reach the point where other people were willing to go.
Right.
But they're still there. I mean, the last 3 homes I closed on were second homes. I would say 75% of the business I do is up there is second homes.
Right.
So,
and those buyers are coming from the Bay Area, San Francisco, South Bay, East
San
Bay.
Francisco, East Bay for the most part. People who just need, they love the urban experience. They love to be in the middle of it. They love the diversity, but they need trees.
Right.
And I think we all learned we need trees in the last year. We need to be outside and in nature. So that's still happening. But what's really interesting is a lot of the properties that sold, I'm going to call it a frenzy of last summer. Yeah. There was a frenzy. People were like, oh my gosh, this is going to keep going forever, and we have to get something now.
Right.
And so people were just out of their minds to get anything they could get their hands on. A lot of those properties are coming back on the market right now.
Now, that's something I had not heard. That's very interesting. So you bought in the frenzy, and now you're like, ooh, maybe I didn't really want to commit to this second home or additional property.
Or now you can go to Europe, right? I mean, half my clients were in Europe this summer, and so they couldn't come see anything, right? So those are also the people who bought these second homes thinking they were going to be stuck in their house forever.
This was their vacation plan.
Right.
Right. But now things are opening up a bit, and they're like, hey, well, we can go back to wherever.
Now they can travel. So I think there's been 4 houses that were hot homes. One came on the market today. Hot homes last year, and they're back on.
And where are they selling compared to where they sold a year ago?
Right, where they sold about. A little bit more, just enough to cover realtor fee, right? Realtor fees and the coat of paint they put on them. But it's cool. Like, I'm calling people going, hey, remember that house that you lost last year? This is your chance.
Right.
Is it worth the extra $20,000 now?
And there may only be a couple offers on it instead of being a frenzy. Again, more opportunity. I think that's
100%.
Yeah. So Regina, you've been doing this for a good while, and you are, kind of going between San Francisco and going to the Russian River, but you're here in Petaluma, and your kids go to school here and everything else. So I always like to just kind of talk about some personal stuff. So kind of tell us a little bit more about you and kind of what else you do besides real estate.
Well, I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old, so I spend a lot of time talking about video games and BMX tricks.
Okay.
But a huge part of what we do right now is just enjoy our house. When we were in the city, we would spend all of our time getting ready to go to the river. So it was like, you get out of school on Friday, you drive to the river, you spend all your time there. And that was our life. We would spend all summer there. So when we moved, we were not planning on moving to Petaluma, but this very cool house came up. It's falling down, but it was on a 1/4 of an acre, like in downtown Petaluma.
Right.
And as an agent, you're like, you can't buy location, you can't buy lot size.
Right.
So we just, with you, we bought it. And not with you, helped us get our loan. Yeah. So we moved to Petaluma, and we did a little remodel, and we put in a pool, and we are living the absolute best life. So we just kind of hang out a lot. Like, the pool was the best investment my family's ever made. We're in the pool till 10 o'clock at night. Amazing. Still, last night we were like, it's October.
Yeah. This is the best month for weather, by the way, in Petaluma. October, hands down, best month. Everyone's like, oh, it's end of summer. Like, no, October is the very best month for weather.
Yeah.
It's the most perfect month of the year. So, you grew up here, right? So this is kind of like a homecoming for you, and that's kind of nice because you're right in between the two markets that you really serve, and you're in both places or working from home, doing your preparation for your clients and so on. So, so kind of looking out into the future. So we kind of know where we're at now, great opportunity and so on. We know where rates are. We kind of know all these things. What do you see looking forward? If you're, I get a lot of buyer pre-approvals and people are like, we're not ready to buy now.
Mm-hmm.
We're thinking about next summer.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to looking at this time next year. We're going to have enough money saved up then, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thought and advice for those folks? People who are like sitting on the fence.
So for home buyers who are looking for their actual home, where they're going to live, their primary residence, I think that living in the moment is super important. Mm-hmm. And, the inventory is going to keep changing, right? There's all these places where you read the New York Times, you read all these places, and they're saying like all-time high inventory. We don't have high inventory right now.
Right.
So if you see a house that you love that will work for you and you can afford to buy it on a month-to-month basis, you're not throwing money away in rent, right? When I bought my first home and we looked at like our mortgage statement after, or we refinanced 6 months later or something, right? And I was like, oh my God, we actually are saving money. Like there's equity in this house. This is our money. And it hit so hard when we had just been paying somebody else's mortgage or whatever, their vacations for so many years. So I think like, knowing that about yourself, if you know where you want to be, right? Because I tell my clients all the time, I'm super transparent, like this house might lose value, right? You might not be able to sell it in 5 years. Do you want to be here for 5 years? Yes? Great, right. Let's buy it. I think
it's a good, healthy approach, right? Because we have no idea. Like we can look at the analytics, we look at the data, we can look at the trends, we can plot out all sorts of charts and stuff, but no one knows. Like no one knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think that especially in this area, super desirable place to live, not a lot of new construction, like very like distinct urban growth boundaries, and limitations of how much housing there will be here.
Yep.
Hard to go wrong.
Yep.
In the long run. If you look at certain periods of time, sure, people have lost money in real estate here just as like anywhere else, but open up, go to a wider view, and it's a really great investment. But most importantly, it's a place to live and raise your family, which you were describing earlier. Like,
I think also this is a really unique time. There's no rentals in Sonoma County, essentially, right? There's no place to move if you need to rent. So I think this is a really unique time for investors who want to buy something, put their money somewhere a little more stable than the stock market. Not that I don't provide financial advice.
Of course not.
But there's such a lack of rentals right now, full-time rentals. So I think that there's a unique opportunity for people who, even if you've seen your money fluctuate in really significant ways, this is a great way to get in at these lower prices. They're still, pretty amazing home prices, but there's so much opportunity to just have renters in a property and just keep that going.
Yeah, no, it's an anecdotal story, but I have a rental, and our tenants, when they moved in, I was kind of like, oh, I think this is what the rent's going to be. And a year goes by, and they're like, they know what their friends are paying in rent, and they're like, you're not going to adjust a rent, are you? I'm like, no, like once you're here, like we're kind of like, over time maybe, but we're good, we're happy. And they're like, oh, because this house could probably rent for $1,000 more, and it's like, it's wild out there. There's just no rental inventory.
Yeah. Yeah.
And most of the rental inventory is short-term rental. There's a lot of, there's actually a growing number of VRBOs and Airbnbs because it's just such a desirable vacation spot that people want to come to the wine country, and they want to, have their home base in Petaluma while they're here because it's central to so many things, which is why we live here, right? Yep. That's what they're experiencing the same things as we are. So, so kind of like wrapping up. So I always ask people, what's like financial advice that you give to people? Because not financial advice, because we just said that we are not licensed financial advisors, but a tip that you think that everyone should live by, like a financial wisdom that you would impart to anyone out there that's listening, that you're like, hey, if you're going to do one thing, this is the thing to do to have good finances. I
think the number one thing is to really engage professionals who are experts in their market. So whether it's that, one, I'm going to call you if I have a question, and I probably have 2 or 3 other people, and I'm going to hear what everybody has to say and then figure out what I need to do as the next step, right? When I have people who say, oh, I can't get approved for this kind of loan, I go, well, call Dan. I'm going to text him and tell him he needs to spend an hour with you because you're going to have 100 questions. And then I'll call you,
Yeah.
And so I think that it's really important to pick the brains of people who spend their time doing these things, right? Buyers who come to the Russian River with a Sacramento agent, it can be a disaster, right? You don't know septic systems, you don't know vacation rental policies, right? So really engage the professionals who you can, and a lot of people will give you advice for free. So don't come to me for financial advice, and if you come to me for loan advice, I'll give you a little bit of info, and then I'm going to give you Dan's number.
Yeah, I think it's really great advice, and local experts that know the markets, know their stuff, there's so many nuances in these different communities, and you really have to know. And I think it's really sound advice, and probably a money saver overall for free advice. Spend an hour with a local professional who really wants to educate you and spend the time with you. So
yeah,
totally. Well, this has been awesome. I really, really appreciate you coming in.
Yeah,
and
fun.
we'll do it again sometime soon.
Cool.
Right on. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan.
See ya.
Stay up to date with Bay Area real estate. Hit subscribe now if you haven't already. Did you enjoy this episode? We love reviews in the Apple Podcasts app. We'll read yours on the show. This is By the Bay.